I'm Sean Serville. And we would like to welcome you to HITC 2015 here at Kamehameha Schools Hawaiʻi campus.
Our theme for this year's conference is Create, Engage, Inspire, Transform.
Wow, sounds exciting. With that said, I think we should get the show on the road. At this time, I would like to ask our hoʻokula, Dr. Stender, to come to the stage and welcome our conference attendees to our campus.
Mai ka pi'ina o ka lā I ha'e kahi apa o hi ai kū nei. A ka velona o ka lā I ka mole ole ua kahi apa pūpū e moe nei. Aloha mai kākou. Mai kai ke ike aku ia oko po kahi apau. Welcome to all of you. It's wonderful to have you all here. E ke kahu wai o i hoi o Lance Wilhelm. Mahalo ia oe e ke po'o no po kipa ana mai I Hawaiʻi nei. Mahalo ia oe e nā hoa alakai o ke kula, a me nā kumu, a me nā hoa kipa hano. Welcome to all of our administrators, our DOE partners in education, our University of Hawaii partners in education, and all of our honored guests. We're so happy to have you here at Kahome Ho'ona'awao o Kamehameha. Kahome Ho'ona'awao o Keali'i Pauahi. So here we are again for Hawaii Island Technology Conference. It's such an honor that you would take your day here and be here today for such a great conference. One of Kamehameha School's working exit outcomes is central to today's theme of transformation and innovation and invention. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about it. In Hawaiian, it's e lawe I ka ma'alea a ku ono. Take your knowledge, take your understandings, and make them deep. It's a way to transform our knowledge through deep thinking and imagination and invention. And so our knowledge becomes wisdom, because that is really what we're aiming for, not only for ourselves, but also for our keiki. You saw the beauty of our keiki as they hulaed for you this morning, as they introduced this morning. I'm so thankful for them for being here, because they are our future. And they're the reason that we're all here today, to learn and to make our knowledge deep. And as you know, you all in this room are leaders. And you're demonstrating your leadership by taking your time to understand the skills of technology and using those skills, making our knowledge deep. Here in this room, we've gathered together as cultural specialists, as mathematicians, as folks who are astronomers, folks who are fishermen, folks who are planters, all of these great pathways and careers we can become, and we can teach our children how they can be inspired and motivated by you. So teachers, administrators, students, thank you for being here today. The important focus of leadership that's being demonstrated today by all of you is the input that we have to look at our strategic plan for the Kamehameha schools. And our new strategic plan has just been launched as early as December 2014, January 2015. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time this morning, just a couple minutes, to talk about how we can use our collaboration starting today to build an educational future for our keiki, which is transformative. A few future where our learners and families are able to realize a bright future as being part of a collaborative educational ecosystem. And we all play a role in that part. So Kamehameha is hoping to partner with all of our internal and external partners, just like today's high-tech HITC conference today, to ensure that we're working with our strategic partners, the Hawaii Department of Education, the University of Hawaii, the network of Native Hawaiian charter schools and immersion schools, and all of you here today. Because together we can be part of an ecosystem and a foundation for our keiki so that they can thrive, so that they can grow, so that they can understand the importance of making knowledge, wisdom, taking ethical ways of approaching our world and turning it into a bright future for all of our keiki here in Hawaii. And of course, being the absent-minded professor that I am, I forgot my clicker over there, so I'm just going to go walk over and get my clicker. Thanks, Marcy. The Kamehameha Strategic Vision 2040, which is being led by all of us here, because there were about 3,000 people that gave input to our strategic vision. So just recently again, we launched the vision in January 2015, and it says, within a generation of 25 years, we see a thriving Lahui, where our learners achieve post-secondary educational success, enabling good life and career choices. We also envision that our learners will be grounded in Christian and Hawaiian values and will be leaders who contribute to their communities both locally and globally. So this is our vision. Looking forward, looking into the future, providing that great foundation for our keiki. It's very much so in alignment with our Kamehameha Schools Hawaii campus vision. And the vision of our campus is that we are a dynamic and wonderful, nurturing K-12 educational environment where haumāna learn Hawaiian worldviews, other global perspectives, and 21st century skills. And why do this? So that they can thrive, so that they can lead successful and fulfilling lives, and engage and compete in ways that contribute to and enrich humankind. So this is what our focus, this is what we hope for all of our children. This is why we come to work with imagination, with creativity, with innovation, with a willingness and a need and an urgency to transform our educational system, both here, of course, in our small campus, in our little part of the world, but also with all of you, collaborating with all you great and wonderful leaders in education. And so it is really my pleasure and honor to welcome you all here today to the Hawaii Island Technology Conference. We know that this professional development opportunity will be great for all of us so that we can take our knowledge and make it very, very deep. So mahalo nui to all of our HITC sponsors, Educational Resources Design, Network 2000, and a special mahalo to all the sponsors who made giveaways at the end of the day, so don't leave early, there's going to be giveaways at the end of the day. And finally, a big mahalo nui to our HITC planning team, Christy, Keali'i, Carmen, happy birthday Kavika, Phil, Dory, Cindy, Danny, Colleen, Carrie, and Ellen. Imua ya okoa pauloa e nā poki'i, aloha akalei o kalanakila, aloha kākou.
Dr. Stender. Well, Sean, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of how fortunate we are in having our next guest here as our opening keynote speaker.
I agree, Calissa. I I heard he's won several local, state, and national awards for his school's production classes. I heard he created an award-winning video production program at El Diamante High School.
That's correct, and he's also a Google certified teacher, an Apple distinguished educator, a Google education trainer, and an Apple certified trainer. Wow, he's a busy guy.
He was also awarded the Computer Using Educator Outstanding Teacher Award in 2009 and nominated for the International Society for Technology and Education Outstanding Teacher Award.
Well, let's get him up here. Can you please help me welcome to the stage our keynote speaker, Mr. Jim Sill.
Mahalo for having me here. After that video, I think I'm done. Thank you. It's been great to have you here. That's fantastic. Another round of applause for this guy. It's really great. I'm amazed by what's going on. I mean, it's just such a wonderful feeling to be up here, to have these ladies, and I'm really excited. So I'm a little bit nervous right now for some reason. But so I want to tell you to start off with that I was recently at a lot of coffee farms. That's what people do when they come to this island, right? So I love coffee. I travel around and I drink a lot of coffee. And so I was at this coffee farm recently. And you know how the Kona coffee farms, I found this bag in the store and I said, hey, this bag looks different than all the other bags. Can you tell me why this one's so much more expensive? And the woman tells me the story of King Kamehameha II and his wife and how they traveled to London. You know this story. And when they died, I think it's smallpox in London, they brought them back home. But they stopped in Rio de Janeiro and they picked up coffee beans there. Or coffee trees, and they planted them on Oahu. And then that bean moved over into to Kona, what we know. But then she said, but then by the late 1800s, they changed the bean from Brazilian to Guatemalan. And Guatemalan coffee is what we know today. She goes, that bag you're holding, is from the original bean. Now, I'm a sucker for a good story. So I spent a lot of money on that. And I understand you guys own a lot of coffee farms. So yes, you're welcome. That's your education. So it's quite amazing. It's pretty amazing. So I love a good story. You know, storytelling is what I've been doing for a long time. I was in television business for about 10 years before I became a teacher of television. And I taught that for 10 years after that. And I tell you, there's nothing more wonderful than teaching kids how to tell a story. The other day I was on a plane and I was watching a movie. It's where I watch movies now. And this is the quote that I saw at the beginning of a movie. And you may know this Mark Twain quote. But I don't know about you, but when I read this, the first thing I thought of was teaching. Raise your hand if you feel the same. That's all. Don't turn around. Everybody raise their hands. Well, I felt like that. So one of my biggest passions is teaching filmmaking. I love getting kids to learn how to tell stories with the medium that we have available to us today. And one of the things that when I taught filmmaking is that I'd have these kids come into my class. The first thing they do is they come into my class, they want to go use the expensive equipment. They want to chase each other around with a video camera. And my favorite thing to do to them for the first 6 weeks was to make them watch something that looked like this. Incredibly boring. It's amazing, right? So this is 56 feet of film. 56 feet of film. It's from the Lemure brothers. They first showed this film, this is the first film they showed to a paying public in 1895 at the Café Indian, which is right down the street from the Paris Opera House, the famous Paris Opera House that you know. So you can imagine the audience was filled with fancy folk. And then they played this, and it's incredibly boring to a kid today. You know, but at the time, there's a story that's being told. Did anybody figure out what the story is? The door opens, everybody comes out, and then the door closes before the 56 feet of film runs out. And so it's quite an achievement. It's quite an achievement. It changed an industry. It changed an entire industry, created an entire industry that we know today. So when I show my kids this, I always have to explain to them that filmmaking has grown. Filmmaking has grown to something that looks like this. And in 1958, Orson Welles, in 3 minutes and 20 seconds, uncut footage is the start of a movie called Touch of Evil. Let's play a bit of it. Filmmakers had to rely on fancy tricks. By that time, in 1958, they had to rely on these fancy tricks to tell their story. So this guy, Orson Welles, went 3 minutes and 20 seconds of uncut footage. If you messed up, you had to start over. It was quite an achievement. They relied on this core principle. You know, these movies at this time rely on the core principles of this. The suspension of disbelief. You have to stop thinking that it's not real. And so that I think translates today to something that looks more like this. You have to convince yourself that what you're watching isn't real, because this is what movies look like today. This superhero, right? This is a superhero. And a lot of a superhero is sitting almost on his tippy toes, holding on to a C-stand almost. And so we have to understand that everything is pretty much fake. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, here's a video. After 100 years of being in business, filmmakers had to change the way they told their story. Audiences demanded it, right? And so we see that here. We see that nowadays all the time. And then, but the thing is, what we see more of now is this. How many people go onto YouTube? Yeah. Kid, I have to tell you, I'm not going to point you out, but every time I talk to kids about that, and I say, how many of you are on YouTube? They laugh at me. They don't even raise their hand. They're just like, whatever, that's so ridiculous. Teachers have to be like, yeah, I do. And some of you did this. So it's funny because there's 300 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute. 300 hours. It's a lot of garbage on YouTube, right? But one of the biggest culprits of uploading videos is these guys. Do you guys know GoPros? How many people have a GoPro? Oh, I love talking about GoPros. Half of you didn't raise your hand. I know that for a fact. That's where these you attach these cameras onto real people, and then they make movies about it. And I tell you, they make almost anything look interesting. The pause button is a magical device, isn't it? But the GoPros have a special place. These cameras are amazing. They mount almost anywhere. And then they put them on a YouTube channel. You guys know YouTube channel. I'll talk about it a little bit later today. They have this one place, this one YouTube channel to make you realize that your life sucks compared to everybody on this channel. The thing is, it makes you realize there's some FOMO. You automatically can't help it, but you feel there's a FOMO. You guys know FOMO? Right? You watch these things, you think you're not living the life these other people are living. You know, the other thing about this camera is that it's amazing. This brand new one they have all these amazing features, but that is the most important. 4K. This camera shoots at 4K. And many of you are like, I have no idea what that means. I'll help you. You guys know the HD television you bought? There's 2 million pixels. Those little tiny squares that make up your screen, 2 million pixels. The 4K camera shoots at 8 million pixels. So high resolution video that's coming out. You IT people right now are freaking out because your bandwidth is going to lower down because it's kids. I see you nodding. So the thing is that it's unbelievable 4K, and then they have the nerve to mount these things on helicopters and fly them around. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like, GoPro put out, like they do with every new camera, they put out a video. And this is what it's like to live life in 4K. So this video, I'm going to show it to you. I want you to listen for the beginning, listen to that first little announcement that they make about life itself.
Life is either an incredible adventure or it's nothing at all.
Great.
HITC and the whole wall started to shake.
You can only imagine what's going on in that guy's head, right? I love this video. It's pretty amazing. There's lots of really cool things in it. But one of the things I realized when I went to kind of piece this together, I sort of took a chunk out of it. I normally cut videos up for the sake of time. And there's one of the things about that video that I couldn't do was cut it, because all the elements of that video leading up to that very moment were important. They all were part of telling you a story that made you realize at that moment when that iceberg started, you were invested. You were already invested. You had empathy for that character, and you don't even know that So what we call those little tiny elements that lead up to that moment, in my world, we call that Chekhov's gun. And the idea behind Chekhov's gun is if you talk about a gun on a wall in chapter 1, you better show it. You better use it in chapter 3. Do you know that? So all the elements are important. It's very similar to, well, it's very unlike some of the kids' writings that we have. When kids write, they often don't use Chekhov's gun. They often use this. And I've made this rated G, but you have to kind of imagine what I mean in a rated PG version of this. So this is what I mean that when kids write, when we teach. You guys know when you show up on Monday morning, you didn't plan your lesson over the weekend? You sort of go like this with a lesson. You get it now? Okay. Okay, good. Keep it cool, there's kids here. So, that idea is that when kids write, they don't, and when we write sometimes, we don't often include those elements that lead up to that. And that's a really important feature of this video we just saw. But the idea of that is that this video is amazing. It's a combination of a bunch of videos that they put together. So here's a link to this GoPro playlist on YouTube of all those videos separated. So you can actually watch all those videos individually. So if you just want to watch the iceberg video, or if you just want to watch the whale video, it's pretty awesome. Okay, so the idea behind all this, when you're watching those videos, is not really about FOMO. It's not about that. It's not about the life you could be living. It's the fact that they've told their story in such a beautiful way that involves you, that hooks you. That's really just this. It's really just this, and getting people to fall in love with what you're talking about. Okay. The piece that I think is great is like we see this happen all the time. We see this happen all the time in videos that teachers having uploaded stuff to blogs. Anybody write a blog? Anybody write a blog? So teachers, I've been telling stories with fancy tools for a while. If you write blogs, this is a great blog from 2002. This teacher friend I know actually paddled in a canoe from Minnesota all the way up to the Arctic Circle. And every day they wrote about it. And they've been inspiring us with their tools for a long time. And then in 2009, this kid, Ryan Runs Europe, he wrote a blog from Amsterdam to Athens, and he ran the entire way. He ran the entire way. Every day I looked to see if he was wrote a new blog, because that meant he was still alive. I was riveted from every single. I actually learned how to use Google Earth because I was trying to figure out where he was and what he was doing. And I love that about some of these pieces. So I have to ask you, what are you doing about this? Is anybody being moved by the stories that you're telling? We tell stories every day in our classroom. I love the Hawaiian culture because of the storytelling. I love the Big Island because of all the stories that I hear. So I always ask when we're trying to tell our story as a teacher, is anybody being moved by that? And so really it's all about these teachers teaching and sharing online, okay? There's this great quote that I found that's from these guys, that those people are not trying to make you feel bad or make you have this sort of it's humble bragging, as they like to say on Facebook. It's really about, they're just writing down this stuff to remember their day now, right? And it's really not about you, it's about them. It's what you are feeling when you look at it. And so, I think what these teachers are trying to do is encourage you. What these people who are posting stuff is they're trying to encourage you and then give you that push, that extra little push to go a little bit further. I love conferences like this because you'll see all these great things that teachers are doing in the classroom. And then at the end of the day, you're like, I'm doing nothing compared to that. Right? And you start to feel really bad about it. It's not that. You're being hooked by the story that they're telling you. You're being hooked by the story. They're not talking to you. And Jenny McGarrett talks about this a lot. They're not telling you all the struggles. They're just up here telling you how amazing they are. And it's something to realize. I love this because, I don't know if you know this blog, Brain Pickings. This woman talks about network knowledge and combinational creativity, that your creativity is enhanced by your experiences. Piaget says knowledge is the consequence of experience. So as we read these stories, as we kind of watch these videos and we hear the stories of success and all that, we learn from that and we adopt those things. This guy, Charles Eames, you guys know him. Many of us have been sitting in his seats for a long time. He talks about how important it is to give credit to those people. And I have to give credit to this one person that inspired me. Today, I'm the Director of Professional Development for a HITC team, and I run the Asia Pacific region of our business. And so I work with teachers all around the Asia Pacific region. And it's quite fascinating to me that because back in 9th grade, Mr. Valley was in a class. He was a high school football teacher, high school football coach, and he taught this amazing class called Afro-Asian Culture Studies. And it started in Africa, and we had to memorize every country, and we talked about the culture, the people, the language, and we moved all across Asia and Asia Pacific until we finished all the way up into Japan. And his stories permeate my mind every day now. So when I travel to these places, I remember Mr. Valley. I remember when we talked about politics, or when we talked about government, and all these things when we land in a place. And what's even more fascinating is those countries I memorized are no longer those countries anymore. And it's so Mr. Valley's been quite an inspiration, you know, because teachers are remembered for the stories that they tell. You know, the flight simulator for the brain. You know, when we talk about projects, kids do projects. I love to have kids stand up and tell me how did they do, what were their struggles, and what were their successes. Because your struggles become my experience, and I learn from your struggles, and your successes become part of my hope. And we love that about stories. You know, everything is remix, right? You know, this remix culture blog, you know, just to copy somebody else's ideas and then transform them and combine them. I love this because we see some of those words all infused in what we're doing today. Okay, so oops, there you go. This is something that we know as filmmakers. As filmmakers, one of the things I knew is that I knew you had a previous knowledge, and so I accessed your previous knowledge, and then I used it against you. In the television business for 10 years, I did commercials, and I convinced people that what people were saying on TV was true. And so that's kind of why I had to leave, by the way. It ruins your soul. I should let you know that. And so one of the things I'll show you this as an example is this next video. If you've ever seen me speak before, you know I don't like sharks. I haven't been in the water since I've been here. That's because I've been busy, not because I hate sharks, but partly because I hate sharks. So there's this great video that came out. So sharks make me excited. They make me scared. So when I saw this posting last year on Google+, it was amazing to me. It has everything I love: GoPro, sharks, guys fighting off sharks. And because I lived most of the time in my life in Australia, I'm like, oh, Sydney Harbor. And then I thought to myself, wait a second, there's great whites and shit in Sydney Harbor, right? So I love this. So I'm gonna let you watch it, and we're gonna have a little conversation about it, okay? So before we do that, do you know your neighbor? We can turn to them and say aloha to your neighbor. So what we'll do is we'll watch this video, and then we're gonna have a conversation about it, okay? Here we go. These GoPro guys live a charmed life, and then that happens, right? So I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you to answer this question. All right, I'm going to give you 1 minute. All right, how many people think it's fake? How many people think it's real? I have no idea. I have no idea. You can go online, you can be like, is that thing fake? And everybody will be like, yes, no, you'll go. Well, what I do know is I know a couple things. I know great white sharks exist in the Sydney Harbor. So that's a fact, right? That's a fact. I also know in Australia, those things, the second most venomous snake in the world, comes out of the sea. Okay? So when I think about that, I'm like, that's 100% in. I'm 100% in. Like, that's got to be real. There's scary things in the water. No one swims in Australia. Do you know that? No. It's a marketing. They tell you that they do. The other thing I also know is that that makes me think it's fake is because if I was down there, one of the first things I wouldn't do when somebody's like, shock, shock, I wouldn't go put my head underwater and go, I wouldn't do that. I would jump out of the water and put on top of the water and then say, I know that is a fact as well. Those two compete with each other all the time in my mind. And so the thing is that when you show a video like that, you create an inquiry spirit with the kid. And kids, when they want to inquire, they start looking at the world around them. They start looking at the world around them because of those stories, and they start wondering how can they use your information to get, how will your information in your classroom help me out in the future? Inquiring minds, right? You're creating those things. Recently, I went to India for the 4th time. I never thought in my life I'd go to India, and the first time I got to India, I realized I never want to go back. Because it's such, for a Westerner, it's such a really difficult place to wrap your head around. Anybody been to India? You know what I mean. It can be, especially in Mumbai. So we work with a lot of international schools in India. And the international school, it's gated, it's beautiful inside, it's beautiful classrooms, movable spaces, and all these wonderful things. But I look out the window and I know that's not the fact. So I asked one of the school people to bring me over to a local school, and this is where I met these kids. These kids were fascinating. It's the kind of school that has a broken chalkboard to go along with their broken computers. And I love this, this little drawing in the corner. That's a mouse, and it's fascinating. These are there's 1.2 billion people in India, and Google and Facebook are trying to put that whole country online. And if you think about that, that's actually 1.2 billion news stories. Imagine what their stories, how their stories will impact what you do. Well, I went into the school, and these are it's a kindergarten classroom. I love how they're sitting down. They're using this chalkboard, you can see them. And then I went into another classroom where I showed them my new favorite tool called the Ricoh Theta. Do you know it? It takes 360-degree pictures in one snap. And I took a picture with my camera, and then it transfers over to your phone, and you can look at it. So I brought my phone down to their eye level, and these kids clambered over each other. The year before, I used a regular camera, and this year I was using a 360. And I love how this kid doesn't care. But I wanted to show you something. I'm not going to freak you out. I just want to show you on my computer what that image looks like and how cool it is to have a business degree when the keynote walks off the stage and walks over here. It's like, hey, go back up there, dude. You don't belong down here. Here, this is the image. And so I'm grabbing with my mouse. I'm turning it around. So you can see the kids, the way they're looking at the camera. Some kids know that you're taking pictures. Some kids are wondering what you're doing in here. Oh, sorry. And then, let's see if I back out. You can come down here. Here's the kid who took the camera, that took the picture. And you can look all around. What an interesting and wonderful new way to tell a story in a moment. 360-degree camera. There's me over there looking at the fool. So this is sort of the thing that I've been playing around with lately, because I think those are the tools that can inspire a classroom. You know, when you grab a kid like that, when you throw them off balance, just like many of you right now are feeling a little off balance, like, whoa, I need that camera, right? And I have an Amazon page, you should go, no, I'm just kidding. So you evoke these emotions. In that moment, I could sell you anything. In that moment, I could teach you anything. The emotions are amazing, those teachable moments that you create from the use of emotions. I use movies for that. I love hooking people with movies. I love it. It's part of my craft. It's part of what I do. It's the hook I bring you in with. And this guy, Scorsese, talks about how important it is for people to understand the visual language. You know, because we aren't talking stories as much as we used to. We're showing stories. We're showing stories. And what I do love, especially the history of the talking stories. I love, you know, when people talk stories, that those things change all the time. The story that woman told me about the Kona coffee, I'm sure it's 100 different versions of that real story. She told me some wild thing I could not prove about how they planted the coffee trees around the burial site of Kamehameha II. And I tried to look that up because I was so suckered into that. I don't think it's true. So stories are changing. So now when we put them on tape, like they're taping this, when we put them on tape, it's important to interpret that. How do we know what's true, what's not? So, you know, when we teach kids how to read stories, how to become literate, visually literate, we teach them to become agile thinkers. Agile thinkers, because when they leave us, we still want them still having inquiry, we still want them processing, we still want them thinking about what's real and what's not. So I just want to help you, or do another little exercise. Another one of my favorite movies. You know why I don't go in the water, right? Because it's Spielberg. Spielberg had this. I'm going to play this clip. We're going to talk about it as well. So remember, your neighbor hopefully didn't say anything mean to them while you were talking before. Here's the clip. We're going to watch it, and then we'll talk about it.
Hey, Mike. I know you got a lot of problems downtown, but I've got a couple of problems with the house I wish you could take care of.
One, I've got some cats parking in front of the house. I can't get out of the office, and then the garbage truck next to the office.
So it only is a red zone. It's a simple thing to take care of.
Honey, would you come here a minute, please? Are you okay?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
He said if the kids come on board, it was rude.
No.
Are they going to pick up the other beach?
All right.
It's cold. We know all about you, Chief. You don't go in the water like all, do you?
It's some bad hat, Harry.
Chief Brody, you are uptight. Come on. That's it.
I want you to talk to your neighbor about the things in that video that made you nervous or sort of love it. All right, so I'd love to get some feedback from you, but I tell you, we'll hit some of the highlights. Probably the one thing that started you off was when that guy was in the way of Chief Brody, and then you heard the screams, right? That starts it off completely. And you're like, dude, I need you to get out of the way. There's people dying in the sea. And then you turn and it's just kids fooling around, right? Those things are throwing you off, right? There's this wonderful montage. That's what it's called, a montage. Collision-style editing, this jumping around of shots when the kids run into the water. Did it make you feel uneasy when the kids went in the water? That collision style of editing causes you to feel off balance. It's something we learned from the Russians in 1918. And so when we see those things, it's amazing. Now, let me ask you about the guy yelling at the ocean, yelling out the word pipit. What's a pipit? Why, you know him? So that's Bobby, he has pipits. His dog is always running away. Where's the dog? You killed the dog, right? You killed the dog. The guy yells out the word pipit, they show you a floating log, and you killed the dog. Shame on you. I recently was talking to somebody about that, and they go, that kid singing that Muffin Man song was creepier than any other. It's true. It's true. So those are those amazing things. Spielberg is amazing at making you think about something, making you afraid of something that didn't show you. You never saw the shark. There was no mention of the shark. You know, there wasn't somebody like, watch out, there's sharks in the water. You find out if you know the movie a couple seconds later, there is a shark. And I love it. All you have to do is show you feet dangling from the surface, and you're like, that's a shark, your kids are dead, all of you. These are emotional triggers. They're emotional triggers. These are the triggers that we set off inside you. Emotional triggers are interesting, like how many people cried at the Super Bowl? Not because the football was over for the season, but because of those darn puppies, right? You watch those puppy commercials. Advertisers know very well that if they sell you a story that you will buy We know that when you, some brain scientists people know, that when you have a simple story, a simple plot line, that it fires off chemicals in your brain. Chemicals in your brain that make you care and make you want to take action. We do it all the time with you guys. It's in advertising, we call that the buy-in. And when I wonder about teachers, we want that. We want kids buying in all the time. But we're not telling the stories the right way. We're not telling the stories the right way because we can impact the buying habits of kids all the time by creating empathy. And you create empathy with character introduction. That's how you create empathy. You introduce people to the character. I don't care if the character is a math problem or if the character is Kamehameha II. You introduce kids with that and they buy in with it. Emotional hooks are great. You know, first fives, you guys know first fives, right? Kids walk in the classroom, it's time to redirect. It's time to redirect them. This is a great video put together that you can borrow, and it's all about emotional hooks.
Do you know who I am? Kelly. Yes, Mama. Yes, I am Kelly.
Weary eyes beyond the darkened sky. Brilliant sun arises and hope grows inside. That today is gonna be the day I finally feel the night. With things that fever pit. Patience is a bitch in a sticky situation that somehow, some way I found my feet, find my way.
All right. I'm not going to look at you. You don't look at me. Clean yourself up. That's rough, right? I taught in the Central Valley of California. Don't look at me. I'm not looking at you. Okay, just look down. You're crying. Look down. So the thing is that I get emotional every time I watch that because it's beautiful. It goes on for 2 or 3 more minutes. This is the guy Zapatow. He goes out and he collects some of the greatest move videos and he combines them all. He breaks tons of copyright laws, but YouTube's still good. What he does is he puts the number here in the corner. He puts the number here in the corner, and underneath the video you can actually go and find that number and look at the whole video. And he takes the perfect pieces out of there. And you know, what happens is when you watch stuff like that, you're triggered. You're watching all these triggers. Some of you saw yourselves. Some of you are relating to people that you know. You see all these wonderful moments. There's beautiful moments in there. You see the boy who the father, whoever's running the camera, says smile, and then he breaks down. He was reading a script that they made him read, and then they said in the script it says you will be a big brother soon. And he's like, oh, you know, it's really the wonderful moments. This is a wonderful moment here as well. And it's those wonderful moments are what our triggers are, right? And so I always wonder, how do we create this environment for kids to start looking and to start, where do we go next? And how do I use this content to take me to another place? You know, we do that in filmmaking when we do something called the mystery box. This guy, J.J. Abrams, talks about the mystery box. It's really called the restricted narrative. When I don't tell you everything you should know, right? When I don't tell you everything you should know, and then you discover it on your own. That investment. This is what J.J. Abrams does. And just to give you an example, that restricted narrative, you remember Lost? You know, so if you look at something like this movie, Godzilla, this is not the restricted narrative. Almost laughable. There's a lot of people really freaking out right now in those buildings when Godzilla comes rolling around. But you're still laughing at Godzilla. This is J.J. Abrams' way of telling a Godzilla story. It's pretty intense. You have to imagine what Godzilla, how big this monster is to rip the head off of the Statue of Liberty. Right? So I wonder, are we still telling Godzilla stories in a Cloverfield world? kids are looking at this kind of stuff all the time. This is what they're used to seeing, and are we still telling stories and telling them what this looks like? You know, I don't know who your sponsors are, and I should have checked before I say the next thing. It's that when we teach out of books, we tell them the next step, and then they jump to the end, and they read the end, right? When we don't teach them everything, we don't show them, they assume the end. They discover the end, and that makes them start looking at their future. How can I start thinking about what else is not being told? Let me just jump through this. Oops, there we go. So this idea of reading these chapters and then sort of like, what's the next page, can be difficult. So just as a time check, what have we learned so far? Okay, we've learned that we have a shopping list that we have to bring to our boss. Right, there's that thing, okay. I showed you a bunch of movie clips, that's good. You have to take a friend, so there's that. There you go. So if you're going to your boss, that's the number you're giving them, and they're going to have all the good fun stuff, right? No, it does seem like I'm selling you a bunch of new tools, and the fact is, the tool has nothing to do with it. The tool has nothing to do with it. Do we need them all? I doubt it. You know, when I brought this up to a friend of mine, Rustin Hurley, wonderful guy. I don't know if anybody know Rustin Hurley? Yeah, there you go. Rustin Hurley's amazing. So I brought it up to him and I said, hey, how do we compare? How do we teach with that? And he just says, how can GoPro compete with us? I think that's a great statement. Because the tools we talk about need to change. Anybody know what this is? Tube of paint. It was the tube of paint that created Impressionism. When painters could leave the studio where their paints were secure and go out and outside in the sun, and where their paints would normally dry off, the tube of paint created an entire movement. So we look at this, we look at how tools can change, but you don't need any tools. We work with a school in Auckland, New Zealand, and I talked to her, they have a BYOD program, Bring Your Own Device program. And the principal there at the time, he goes, if kids bring in a crayon and paper as their device, then that's what they're bringing. Because the tool shouldn't matter. It's what you do with it. You know, we look at these SAMR models. You know the SAMR model? We see it introduced a lot. Nobody raised their hand, so they're either bored or that's really awkward. So the SAMR model is this. So when you bring in a tool for the first time, we typically just substitute what we normally do with it. That's like taking writing with Google Docs, and then just start still writing our reports. The goal is to get up to redefinition. The goal is to get up to redefinition. As the advertising guy, I always like to sell it like this. You know, these first couple hills, how do I introduce the tool and then augment my lessons? There's a huge gap to where you're starting to modify and then redefine your lessons with it. You know, that gap between enhancement and transformation is huge. It's huge. And I believe, as a creative guy, I believe that you have to use creativity to get there. How do I use this? What do I do with that tool? And you know what? You don't know the answer. And that's fine. You have to screw it up a few times, fall into the hole. You have to fall into the hole a few times. But what happens when you jump, everybody else starts to follow. Are you the one on Monday who creates that bridge, or are you waiting to follow? And both are fine. It takes risk to jump. And then it takes a little bit of courage to walk across that bridge. And that's the idea of these wonderful conferences that has been put together for you. You know, we look at these tools, we think it's the digital revolution. You know, I love the whole statement of the digital native versus the digital immigrant. Stop it. Stop it immediately. You know, I think we took that out of context anyways, because we are all born into this, the idea. We know how to fail. We know how to fail. We give that experience to kids when they're using those tools. Because it's not a digital revolution, it's a creative revolution. You know, this was my first computer. People are always like, my first computer was the Apple IIe. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what that is. I know a few of you are like, yeah, you love it. I don't even know. I resisted computers until 1997. 1997, I had gone to college to be a filmmaker. I learned how to edit on these gigantic machines. They told me, anybody know editing, what I just did? That's so awkward. Can two of you at least help me out with that? I'm editing, yeah, so I see you, thank you. So the thing is that I was told that it was so expensive, it was going to be a lot of money, and you were going to have all this big equipment for that stuff. And then I found out that machine made movies. So I invested my money, and I didn't have any, and I invested that money into that machine, and I taught myself how to edit. After having gone to college, I taught myself how to edit. And I read this Wired magazine recently, and it talks about when computers suddenly became creative tools, that's when everybody got involved with it, right? The emotional power, the hook that came with that. The hook that came with that. So it's here. By using that to share, write, and all those one things, we unlock the potential of those machines. Now, I know some of you math people, you love your calculations on those things, but I don't know about that. I don't know how to use that machine for any other purpose but to create. The thing you have to remember, this is one of my favorite slides, I use it almost all the time, is this. When you go to finally do it, Monday morning, you have to realize that there's a big ugly thing in the middle of you finishing your project. Fear. Fear will get in the way. It will turn your project into an ugly mess. Be okay with that. Be okay with that. Period one, that's a throwaway. Right? Preaching to the choir on that one, all right? High school teachers know all that. No, that's a joke, I didn't say that. So that's an important thing to understand. So to talk about how people apply it, you want that slide back? I think so, I'm just taking a picture. So what people are doing is that they're throwing fear out the window and they're doing exactly what I'm talking about, telling their stories in amazing new ways. And so here's a great video from Tina Shea Blanchette, a teacher who's up on that roof right now, who put together a video, who helped students put together this video about math. Oops, I'm sorry. Is that playing? Oh, we have to play it. Let me go here. There it goes.
John, Eric, Patriot, the best high school has ever done. I do it for the school. My students are now in and I don't care what nobody say. I'm a teacher, conic sections and the graphs. You will find greatness whenever you follow this path. I'm out here graphing. I be splitting dope and poems every day, homie, because it's so easy. I'm out here. Every time, and calculate truth if you like it or not. Ask how much that you love, circle is parabola. You be dealing with the books, making high hyperbolas.
I have no idea what's going on here. But the kids who put this together are understanding conic sections pretty well, I imagine, right? And what I love is that they walked around the school and they engaged all these other people who would normally not be engaged to do some really great stuff. Right? Many of you saw some of your people in those videos, right? And so my favorite part, I can't play the whole thing for the sake of time, but my favorite part is they were able to find that teacher. I'm sure you didn't hear him, but he says, when I teach, I preach, so gather around. It's good, right? It's good. I don't care, like when I watch a video like this, as a film person, it's flawed in every way I can imagine. But when I watch it as a teacher, it's amazing. It's really amazing. There's so many great things that involve so many different people in their learning process, all because they decided they wanted to tell the story of conic sections in a whole new way. And so we see that. And I ask you, as I start to wrap up, I ask you to embrace this curious amateur in you. There's a great book, Spark, and even in the beginning they talk about the curious amateur. How I believe, we all have that amateur in us. But because we're so worried all the time about proving ourselves as a professional instead of just being recognized as one, we worry about looking like an amateur. I say go back and look at it anyways. I say go back and just sort of mess it up and do some really cool stuff. And then when you start to look at your projects, be very amateurish about them, about the outcomes. Giving kids an opportunity to tell their stories like we've been seeing so long in so many different ways. Education comes across as polished. The people who have their degrees and all these wonderful things that tell us that education is polished. And they use really, really great words. Words I don't know how to use as a film major. I don't even know what they mean. I have to look them up. I sit in the back with Google and just look up all the words when I'm sitting in presentation. Because I don't understand this. And I know a guy who taught at my school. Anybody science teacher? Science teachers, Shout out. ScienceGeek.net. This teacher who was in the 300 building at El Diamante High School that I didn't even know existed many times, except when I watched him in our meetings, he would just sort of be feverishly writing. He made up ScienceGeek.net, one of the most popular science websites in the world. He's sitting in the 300 building, and what he does is he takes all the jargon, the educational jargon, and he made the jargon generator. That stuff in the blue was from the jargon generator by me just clicking a button. Doesn't it sound like I'm smart? He took that from all of our meetings, and he just clicks a button, puts verbs next to adjectives, and it just creates that. So this is how I sound smart in my meetings. And so this guy's great. But learning really is messy. Learning is messy. You know, I taught kids, and I've spoken about it before, I taught kids how to make Shakespeare sonnet videos. I don't know anything about Shakespeare. I fell asleep when shakes was said before peer was out of their mouth. And I didn't understand anything about Shakespeare until my kids taught me about it. Until my kids translated Shakespeare into English and created whole new videos about it. It's really wonderful. As I travel around, I meet amazing teachers like this guy Miguel. He's in Muscat, Oman, and he told me that he changed all the words lessons to episodes because he wanted kids to have the same feeling that he has when it says to be continued. And so he's taking the language of film, television storytelling. There's a guy, Wes, out of Bangkok, Thailand, talks about how he wants his kids to have FOMO for their assignment. If I don't do this, will I be missing out? So embracing the 4K idea in a non-4K world. They're taking the emotional piece of 4K film and video and turning it into their world. You know, brain science, they talk about how teachers should be working to connect. Well, I just said that, but they talk about how people connect, that neurons fire together, that fire together wire together. And what does that really mean? It's basically when you create connections to ideas, that kids continue to grow those connections. So if you can connect your content to what's going on in the real world, you're creating these lifelong connections in their brains. And we do that with story. We do that with storytelling all the time. You know, we have to do that quickly because somebody else is going to get into their life and connect some other neurons. And so other people are going to wire those brains together, but we don't want that. We want to get in there first. One of my favorite things about Hawaii is this, the hokulea. The hokulea inspires me everywhere. We work with some folks. We're going to Auckland, New Zealand next, and the hokulea has landed there. And I love the story of the hokulea. And I was looking online the other day just because I love the Hawaiian stories. And so there's a great website. You guys know these guys? It's like a shoe store. But what they've done is they've done these walk stories. They created these walk stories. And I'll just play the clip of the one that I was watching the other day. Is that okay?
I mean, the navigation system, in many ways, is really quite simple. We have this amazing natural world, and all the signs in the sky, in the heavens, in the wind, in the wave, all that you need to know to sail to an island very, very far away is there. The question is, can you see it, and can you hear it?
I think the moment that I knew I was kind of getting ready for the path that I'm on now was just listening to Nainoa Thompson give a talk at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. He did a presentation on voyaging and just told these amazing stories, and it really inspired me, and I knew I wanted to learn from him, and I wanted to somehow be a part of those stories, you know?
You have to have a vision for where you're going to go to. Metaphorically, every child should have that. Some place that they're going to be heading to that makes their life meaningful. If you took the voyage as the voyage for life, then you would hope that you could help children understand that it is your right to set destination, to set the place that makes sense for you. It's your right.
This is an advertiser telling the story of Hawaii. And what I love for you to do is take it from them. take those stories out of an advertisers who are just trying, ultimately they're telling a great story and I don't know them, but the idea is they're selling things with the emotional hook. How do you use a story like that to hook a kid in your content? I mean, if you look at that story of the Hokulea, there's so many examples. Cross-curricular, you can cross all the curriculums just to discover what's going on with that. And to tell a story like that, it's an easy story to tell. It's just a bunch of video of the beautiful islands. That's all it is, and then somebody talking over it. It's a simple process. They turn these talk stories to walk stories. You know, I always love the people that, you know, people are always like, design thinking. I love what design thinking has to do, but I always like, I prefer design doing. Getting things done, and going beyond just putting up things on the wall. Because those talk stories turning into walk stories really are about this. That's the beauty about the Hokulea, is that it connects today to the past. It connects today to the past, but also looks forward to the future. How can you, what are you teaching that's doing the exact same thing? Are you feeling FOMO from this? If you're feeling FOMO from this, you're actually being fooled by the story. You're being fooled, you're being hooked by the emotion. What you have to look is beyond that. How was the story told and what can I do with that? It's a beautiful picture I took the other day, because you can't take a bad picture, as you know. It starts with an idea. It's simple. It's a simple thing. As you leave today, walk away with an idea. And this is what Nancy Duarte says, which she talks about in her book, Resonate. When they're communicated, people will follow and change. Do you remember that video I showed you at the beginning? 56 feet of film. They only had, 46 seconds to tell a story. And what you don't know, maybe you don't know, is that movie, it took them 3 times. It took them 3 times to get that boring 40-something second video right. You know why? Because they couldn't get the door closed. So they did 3 different times, and that last one, the one I showed you the very first time, was the perfect one. Or the one they gave up on. You know, I don't know, either way. So as you sit there and you process that, I just encourage you to find out what your 56 feet of film is. What is your story? And then how can you use it to change an entire industry? Thank you very much, you guys. I appreciate having me.